Patrick, thank you so much for joining me on this series that I've been doing on Monero and Christianity. And I really wanted to get you on because I consider you the leading scholar of dissecting historical technocracy and how it relates to our current predicament. And also, I know that you have written many books, which I'll put on screen now that people can certainly check out. But you also have this added benefit of being an economist, and that being your background, and a Christian. I know that you have an entire website dedicated to the Book of Revelation and biblical prophecy. So I think that you're a very rare breed. So I think in terms of having an expert opinion on what technocracy is, particularly as an economic system, this is something I really want to dive into in this discussion because I think a lot of people, if you type in, for example, into Google technocracy, you're going to get ruled by technical experts, and that there's an element where that is true, but it's obviously not the full picture. And then you might find another definition that says, well, it's the science of social engineering on the populace of, and again, that's also true. But then there's actually a third and final layer to this strange definition is that it's actually it's a way to control the economy. And if you'd like to maybe introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about the economics of technocracy.
You bet. Well, this is why I got started on technocracy in the first place was but my economic background. And when I was teamed up with Anthony Sutton, who is a Brit, by the way, Anthony Sutton was a economics professor at UCLA, and then he went to Stanford after that. And he got kicked out because he decided to study the Trilateral Commission back in that day. That was like 1976 for him, and basically they didn't want any part of that, and he didn't realize that David Packard was a member of the Trilateral Commission. He happened to be the president of Stanford at the time, and he said, "No, we're not going to do that," and they kicked him out. So in any case, that's how I got involved with him and studying globalization. Today, I see that period of time as being the kind of the headwaters of modern globalization, and um, is to me, it's pretty obvious what happened, but most people don't understand it. But it was economic system in the first place. The Trilateral Commission said they wanted to create a new international economic order. We didn't know really what that meant at the time. I do now because it was technocracy. There's never been another um, economic system invented from scratch in the whole world, except for technocracy that was invented at Columbia University, 1932, and it was headed up. The committee was headed up by top engineers and scientists at Columbia University, and there's some others involved as well. But this was a big deal for various reasons. They got kicked out of Columbia University, and they started out on their own with an organization called Technocracy Inc. Incorporated. But nevertheless, that's where this whole thing started. It was a resource based economic system from the get go, and they hated politicians. They would have gotten rid of every politician in the America, especially. Um, they would not tolerate Marxists either. They hated the Marxists and vice versa. Um, but it was a very mechanistic worldview that they're trying to impose on humanity. Um, and they wanted to micromanage everything in sight. It's inconceivable to think at that time with the technology that they had at that time, they foresaw this outcome today, where everything is being micromanaged, including people, of course, including your body, including your genetics as well, and everything else that goes into you, the food, the water, this supplies and goods and services, etc. This whole thing has come to a head now, and like in 2025, where people can feel the squeeze coming on them at this point. It's unmistakable that this concept of scientific dictatorship is where it's at right now.
Yes, and it's interesting how it correlates with biblical prophecy. You get to
Yes.
the book of Daniel, chapter 7, and you have this Daniel has this vision of four beasts, and the fourth beast is described to Daniel as being unlike all the other beasts that came before it. Well, now we have a system which relies on technology, which is, in a very literal sense, very different from any other political system that has come before it. So we've sort of seen the kind of the starting of what I believe Daniel witnessed in his visions. And again, we see in Revelation 13 with the beast system, where this is amalgamation of politics, the economy, and religion all kind of merging into a similar
Okay.
system. And I think one of the interesting things that I came to understand by looking at the technocracy study course, which they've produced this big manual of what technocracy is that at the head of it all is the continental director. So at the end of the day, it's this kind of technological system that's all controlled by one guy. It's like that sounds a lot
Mhm.
like this person that we're supposed to be expecting on the prophetic scene, so to speak. So I do see technocracy as sort of the leading expression of what I think the reformers called the spirit of Antichrist.
Yes.
So I think there's always been this pervading spirit that has sought to essentially bring in totalitarianism in some form of degree. And I think it's always the Christian's responsibility, no matter what period of history we find ourselves, to resist the spirit, to destroy the works of the devil, and to just boldly preach the Christian message despite this. So I love the fact that you're one of the key researchers in this area, and you have that that spiritual background, that conviction, which I think is very valuable in this fight. So with that being said, as an economist now, if you put your economist hat on, what does the Bible say about economics? Because I feel like this is an area which not many Christians have really thought much about. What does the Bible actually say? What is a good economy or a bad economy? And something that I came to the understanding of is, I've often heard sermons about money, but it's usually to do with stewardship. Like, this is how you should steward your money. But I've never ever heard a sermon on what money is and what constitutes good money and bad money. So, from your background and your understanding of the scriptures, how would you define biblical economics?
Wow. Well, I number one, I can think of the verses in Proverbs, for instance, that talks about using an honest scale.
Mhm.
Uh, there was a time, in fact, there was many times in history where there really was not an a system in place where things were done in barter. I'll give you whatever, some sheep or what a cattle or whatever. You give me some hogs or whatever, some other form of payment, maybe silver. But the idea was when you make a consenting agreement with somebody, you don't want to cheat them for one, and you need it to make sure you have an honest scale. That means you can't fudge the the system, and as long as people um, got didn't try to cheat somebody, things work really well in an economic system. When money was kind of other than gold and silver, when money was brought into existence, um, all everybody that had an evil bent wanted to uh, cheat the system. For instance, in Rome, where gold coins were used for money, the money changers or anybody who came in contact to the coins, they would use a sharp edged like a razor to uh, shave off a little bit of the coin, just not enough that you could tell what it was shaved, but nevertheless a little bit of shavings off of a bunch of coins. All of a sudden, you have a nice little nest egg for yourself. That's cheating,
Mhm.
and people have always tried to cheat the system that way. So, the at this point, one of the reasons that no monetary system in the world is working the way it should is because everybody's cheating. They wanted just to
Yeah.
take something off the top, whether it's uh, scraping gold or padding a budget, siphoning off funds. Maybe it's even the waitress or the waiter who tries to skim off the top of a check, to put a few pennies in their pocket. Um, this propensity to cheat has always been the trouble with money, and
Mhm.
eventually every system seems to fail.
Mhm. And as you certainly see that in Daniel chapter 2, where Daniel is given this vision of the basically all the kingdoms of the world in relation to Israel. And it's interesting that they're sort of manifested in these depreciating metals. They starts with
Hmm.
gold and from gold to silver, and it kind of goes all the way down to iron mixed with clay, which I think is where we are now with this kind of immigration
Yes.
happening. And I think that's the tendency of hard metals is that they eventually always become depreciated through a form of usury, a form of cheating the system.
Yes.
I think this is why I'm interested in things like cryptocurrency, because it's one way to sort of use math to prevent that from happening. And there are obviously going to be disadvantages for every economic system, but I do see um, an alternative arising for Christians to use. So here an example in the UK, I can go to the Royal Mint and I can purchase an ounce of silver coin, and it's technically legal tender. Now businesses aren't obligated to accept it, but courts are. So if I had to pay a fine in court, I could actually use silver to pay my fines here in the UK. But here's an example: if I can buy a coin, and I think that the smallest coin that you can get is an ounce, and it's about 40 pounds, which maybe
Mm.
$50,
Mm.
which is fine if you need to buy stuff for $50, right? But what happens if you want to buy something for 20? How do I split the difference? Well, if I used a silver coin and then I use something like Monero, a cryptocurrency, which is actually a private cryptocurrency, I could then split the difference with a cryptocurrency. So you could have a pretty robust economic system by using both a hard asset like silver, whilst then also on top of that using something that which is far more flexible, especially for international trade, like a cryptocurrency. I know that you are quite skeptical of cryptocurrency. Correct me if I'm wrong, but let me know your apprehensions of cryptocurrency and why you might have some reservations about it.
Today, we see in America, especially, um, all of these technocrats swarming around President Trump. I just posted an article today on technocracy.news giving the names of many of those technocrats. One, there's two objectives to this group of technocrats. One is deregulation, uh, that is stripping away the regulatory powers from the government and giving it to private industry. Um, Another objective is to normalize cryptocurrencies, and that whatever anybody can say about crypto, and there's been lots of good things said over the years, but at this point, it seems to be that the objective of this technocratic crowd is to strip the Federal Reserve System, from its ability to manufacture or create what's called central bank digital currencies. Uh, President Trump actually created an executive order specifically forbidding our Fed from issuing central bank digital currency. So that has paved the way now for the technocrat crowd to bring in other cryptocurrencies. They're talking about stable coins at this point, not necessarily Bitcoin, but you can see this is going to be in the mix somewhere. Um, how they're going to express themselves, I can't say at this point. I don't have enough details or understanding probably either. But we do know that this is coming for our future, especially in America. And who at this point, who knows? Um, I researched your solution a little bit. It's interesting for me to see what you're suggesting. Um, but this whole the whole the whole thing of crypto this is so far over the heads of people today.
Hmm.
They just don't get it, and they 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 won't get it, I don't think, until it just comes slamming down on them, and then it's too late. So, who
Yeah.
knows? Yeah.
Well, I find that the general consciousness around surveillance has increased. I think people feel more and more
Yes.
like they lack privacy. So Monero claims to be the one of the only private by default cryptocurrencies.
Mhm.
So unlike Bitcoin with a ledger, all the transactions are completely public. So I could just look up someone's address and find out how much Bitcoin they have and see who they're transacting with. So I do see a stable coin like Bitcoin, which has a completely surveillable ledger to actually further the technocratic surveillance state because it actually benefits it because it just creates more surveillance. It's even more traceable than kind of your own fiat in your bank account because that's somewhat private in the hands of your banker.
Mhm.
So I one thing I've been thinking about, and maybe get your thoughts on this, is thinking of economics as warfare. So I don't know if you are familiar, but the British during World War II established a Ministry of Economic Warfare. This was headed by a spy master called William Stevenson, and he was actually sent to Norway in order to sabotage the production of heavy water because they got caught wind that Hitler was trying to produce atomic bombs, and you need heavy water in order to produce this. So they went into Scandinavia even before they invaded, and their goal was to sort of upset the economy so that to slow down this process.
Mhm.
And it reminds me of Ecclesiastes 7, verse 12, and I'll read it here. It says this: For wisdom is a defense, as money is a defense.
Mhm.
But the essence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. So I've started to think of economics as a weapon, and so
Mhm.
therefore Bitcoin could be a weapon of surveillance if it's implemented. But then the alternative is that if you don't have a public ledger, but you have an encrypted ledger, one that is private, then the solution to surveillance is encryption. And so that's been something that I've been thinking about quite a lot, thinking of economics as a weapon. And then as you see the implementation of technocracy
Mhm.
as sort of this way to control people's behavior through an economic system. So I don't know if you've ever thought about economics in terms of warfare. Is that something that's kind of crossed your mind?
Well, absolutely. There's a great book. I can't remember the author's name, but it was basically the title was the economic hitman, and it described how uh, agents of the United States had gone into countries like South America, for instance, where these countries were taken down by intentionally by members of, well, like the World Bank and IMF, et cetera, where economic warfare was the tool that they used to take these countries down and strip them of their national assets. It was an incredible thing. So, yes, absolutely. You also have to remember that all wars previously in history have all been fought over some aspect of economic activity.
Hmm.
Either people wanted the land, there were the resources, whatever the neighbors had, um, or they were fighting starvation or what, like happened in Egypt, for instance, where uh, people got hot. They figured, well, they're going to die, so we might as well go to war. And this has been, I think, a pretty common occurrence throughout human history.
And then on the backs of this idea of warfare, we really saw I suppose, an increase in uh, intelligence and communications. And I think this was really spurred on since, well, most prominently because of Nazi Germany, because of their Blitzkrieg, their lightning war strategy. and they had a slogan that speed of communications was the speed of attack. So,
Mhm.
and you have little old Britain, which is really just a tiny isle, and historically been surrounded by enemies and has always had a pretty robust intelligence network because of this reality. They, through uh, projects such as Operation Ultra, start to decode the Enigma signals that the Germans were
Mhm.
using, and it was
Mhm.
through that they were able to have Operation Diode with Dunkirk and the evacuations, and eventually uh, score victory because they didn't destroy their hard assets. They had superior intelligence. I think this system was then brought to the US, and it was actually the British who set up the Office of Strategic Services, which then led to the CIA and the kind of the modern
Right.
intelligence industry. I think it really came out of World War II and the British sort of
Mhm.
need to survive in this type of environment. In terms of warfare and signals intelligence, this is something I've spoken to on this podcast before. Is the idea is the Bible being having a form of encryption. So, Proverbs 10 or Proverbs 25, verse 2 says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but it's the glory of kings to search out a matter." And the word conceal in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, that word is crypto. So it is the glory of God to encrypt a matter. It is the glory of kings to unencrypt a matter, is how we could maybe translate it in modern vernacular. Again, in Proverbs 10, verse 14 says, "Wise people store up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction." The word for store up in the Greek Septuagint, again, is crypto. So wise people encrypt knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction. So I find it very interesting, the kind of in terms of modern warfare, the use of signals intelligence, and the Bible is itself a encrypted
Yes.
a signal for a
Mhm.
battlefield combatants situation,
Mhm.
which we're sort of entering in. So I've become far more militant, I suppose, in my Christianity after kind of looking into these things, which is quite
Mm.
exciting.
Indeed.
So, Patrick, do you ever think we're going to move into a near future where thinking is illegal, where thinking becomes illegal? I kind of see this with modern social media, where people say, "Oh, well, why should I listen to you? You don't have 50,000 subscribers on YouTube, and look how much engagement your post get. You get, so why should I listen to you?" And it's kind of like this: people have been socially engineered to associate truth with popularity. The problem is that you can control all of that with machines, and you can fake a lot of that engagement. And now we're seeing the rise of AI and generative AI, where I think people are going to say, well, where did you hear that? Which AI prompt did you use to come up with that strange idea? Oh, you read books? Oh, you actually thought about this yourself? No, 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 no. You've got to, I'm not trusting that. I'm only trusting what the machine is telling me. So I know this is something I've been thinking about. Do you think technocracy is going to make thinking illegal in the future?
It may not be make it may not make it illegal, but certainly it's gonna be obsolete
Hmm.
in the future. This is one of the dangers of AI that, it prevents people or it causes people to need to not think, about complex issues, especially. Um, what some of the, leading, critics of AI, actually people are in that field, but they're critics of this concept in at least, that, AI is going to, collapse reality for many, uh, large segments of society, where you will not be able to tell what's true or not,
Hmm.
and that, when you're separated from reality, psychiatrists call that being in a psychotic state at that point. That's just a symptom, it's not a diagnosis, but, when you are in a psychotic, state, nothing makes sense to you. You can't reason anything out of it, whatever you see. So you look at something, you say, "Well, I think that's what I see, but I can't trust my own eyes." At that point,
Hmm.
that's not the may not be exactly what's there. So AI at this point, is gonna have a horrible effect on the human's ability to think and to think for themselves as well.
Yes, yes, certainly. And it also makes a population more dependent on technology, right? Because if you are like, we all kind of see this with spell checkers now, and Google Maps and these types of programs, you become far more dependent on them. I would almost panic if I had to pull out a map and navigate myself somewhere.
Yes,
Whilst that used to be common practice, and it makes people more reliant on technology. If they become more reliant on technology, well, then the likelihood of them being engineered through technological systems, it becomes more apparent.
it is. We need to remember that the first part of the definition of technocracy in the 30s was that technocracy was the science of social engineering. That's what they said, and we see this all over the place now, of course. But that was part and parcel of the technocratic ideology that social engineering would be a way to control all of the people in the society, to prevent them from using critical resources or perhaps any resources at all. But that was the purpose. So social engineering at this point is has many flavors for sure. Not of this. A big one, of course, is propaganda, nudging. You people had
Mhm.
some in the UK had some experience with a nudge unit over there who was operating on people mercilessly to get them to do things that they didn't want to do, especially during the COVID era. Um, but social engineering going forward from here is just going to be a huge, huge thing. And um, at this point, they have enough tools to rewire your brain to think the way they want you to think. So they don't have to put words in your mouth like they did in the book 1984, for instance, to force you to say something. But if they can rewire your brain to think the way they think, you'll come up with stuff on your own without any prompting. And at this point, this is going to result in a society that's just totally unplugged from reality.
Yes, and I think a great insight into the mind of a technocrat who wants to be a master planner and socially engineer the population is a book written by B.F. Skinner called Walden 2. And it
Yes,
is a fictional tale of basically a technocratic society in which everything is automated and augmented.
exactly.
And B.F. Skinner is sort of famous for coining the term operant conditioning, which is that behaviors are conducive to the environment. So if you
Mhm,
shape the environment, then you shape behavior. And what's the ultimate environment, right? It's the climate. So if you can get people to have a certain perception about the climate, well, then you can shape their behavior. So this is a form of social engineering, operant conditioning. Another part of it is to create people to be responsive to pleasure and pain inputs. And he was famous for putting pigeons in boxes and rats in boxes and kind of feeding them through these mechanical systems.
mhm,
And I think this is where it comes down to a social engineering campaign to delegitimize Christianity in society. Because you see this in media, for example, you watch The Simpsons, and who's the local idiot? Oh, well, it's Ned Flanders, and he's the Christian. You look at something like The Big Bang Theory. Well, it's Sheldon's mother, who's from Texas, and she's this Bible thumping Christian. Even things which you wouldn't even think they come up. Like I saw a clip from Edward Scissorhands. It's not a film I've seen before, but yeah, the idiot and the production is a Christian. So I think there has been maybe the most noticeable is V for Vendetta, which completely inverts the it puts Guy Fawkes, who was a Jesuit sympathizer, trying to bring England under the papacy, and makes him into the hero as some type of freedom fighter when he was the exact opposite. He was trying to bring independent England back under the papacy. So there's been this, I believe, social engineering campaign to delegitimize Christianity, and I think the fear of religious extremism has also been part of this because, yes, people who have extreme religious beliefs will die for their religion, but people who do not will also live for anything. And that's the goal. So like if you won't die for anything, well, guess what? You'll live for anything. And if you
mhm,
live for anything, well, then you will just capitulate to whatever has power at that time. And you would say, oh yeah, I'm going to get along to get along, live and let live. And you're not going to make a stand when it really push comes to shove. So I don't know
mhm.
if you have that same sentiment, but that's something I've certainly seen in terms of social engineering to delegitimize Christianity in order to bring in a totalitarian scientific dictatorship.
Yes, and there's an interesting another side of that is the pull uh, to to worship what's emerging now as the AI God.
Mm.
This is still in its initial stages for sure, but you can see um, many signs in the economy and the technocratic core of people in Silicon Valley, for instance. This idea of a super intelligent entity that may be like ASI, artificial super intelligence, but they're worshiping already this God who they think is going to be omniscient, omnipresent, and uh, all knowing. And crazy as it is, um, this intelligence goes beyond where most people are right now. In other words, they can't conceive how anything could be that intelligent, and it resembles God at this point for those people.
Mhm.
And I think by the time you get to Revelation 13, for instance, when
Yeah.
this AI and monster, if you will, the beast system, is presented in an image that's supposed to represent the Antichrist, able to speak, able to reason, absolutely in touch with everything that's going on, has the power to kill as well. That's significant for sure at that point. Um, yeah, this is really crazy stuff. But you're right. There's been a concerted effort to banish Christianity off the face of the planet, and that's going to get worse over time. But that'll be supplanted at some point by this drive to the AI God.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. It's. I think many Christians might see this and be fearful, but I'm always reminded when Jesus says, when you see these things, it doesn't say stockpile guns or move to the country and build a bunker. Jesus says, look up, for your redemption
Yeah.
draws near. So I actually see it as encouraging. It's almost like I don't know, it has the opposite effect on me. It doesn't discourage me. It actually encourages me when I see biblical prophecy kind of being fulfilling before our eyes. Like even the fact that the false prophet calls down fire from heaven to deceive people. Well, we now have direct energy weapons like space lasers. It sounds utterly insane, but the
Hmm.
technology certainly exists to be able to shoot something down from space and to
Yeah.
blow something up on the Earth. So it is pretty wild. Now, one thing I'd like to talk about is the idea of urbanate spaces. I know in your book, Technocracy, The Hard Road Toward Order, you actually dedicate 3 entire chapters to the idea of smart cities and its role in technocracy. Why was that the case? Why dedicate such a large chunk of your book to these ideas of urbanate spaces and smart cities?
Well, it's all about control. That's how you manage the resources in your that you have the power over to manage. um, it's difficult for most people, especially Christians, but not just Christians, to think that uh, resources means the oil, the food, the farms, the timber, the mining stuff, and whatever the earth can produce, all the animals. You think about resources in that way. But when technocrats get a hold of this concept about resource management, they also include you and me in that pool of resources that needs to be managed. And we're on the same plane as all the other resources in society. In their mind, when they look at people as a competing resource for all the other resources in society, they have to keep that in balance.
Mm,
That's one reason, by the way, they adopted the yin yang symbol as their logo back in the
okay.
30s. That represents balance, right? So when you have a smart city and you can surveil everything in the city because you have sensors embedded and you have people carrying their smartphones and talking to Alexa and Siri and whatever. Everything can be monitored at that point, and you can contain people in a smart city like the cattle in a feedlot, literally. I don't know
Mhm.
if you have feedlots over there, but we have a bunch of them here, and it's kind of well, it's nice on one hand because we get steaks out of it, but on the other, you look at them and say, well, it's not too good for the cattle. They moo and they're shoved from this corral to that corral. They're given shots. They're given a ration of food is mixed for them specifically, and well, this is the concept, the technocratic concept of how society should be run.
Mhm.
We're just resources to be managed. That's anti-human.
Yeah. It was anti-Christ, and it really is an inversion of the kind of commandment of God in Genesis to have dominion over the earth. So no longer
Yes.
is humanity having dominion over the environment is now having dominion over man. So it is quite
Mm,
bizarre. This idea of worshiping AI has reminded me of a verse here in Daniel 11:38, talking about the man of sin, and he's saying, "But in their place he shall honor a god of fortresses, a god which his fathers did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver." So again, are we going to come back to a gold and silver standard? Because it seems like he's going to honor this fake god with gold and silver. You go down to verse 43 of the same chapter. He then it goes on and says, "And he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver." So again, are we going to see a kind of monopolization of all the world's assets and resources into the hands of the man of sin? Um,
yeah.
I certainly think so, because if you start reading things about Jesus's return, the day of the Lord, when Christ is apocalypsed, is
Mm,
revealed, you see people during this time running into the rocks and throwing their gold and silver to the
yes.
baths.
Yes.
So it's quite interesting, because it seems that they will gold and silver will still hold value, and that is, I personally have a sort of mixed relationship with hard metals, because
Mm,
in one way I see, well, the Bible says that they hold value, and that this is constantly throughout the scripture says, better than gold and silver is
yes.
wisdom in certain things. But then I also see the man of sin kind of monopolizing it, and even currently it's like who has the majority of the gold and silver reserves? Well, it's the people who kind of run the satanic global
Mhm.
economic system.
Mhm.
So I'm sort of at odds, where I think ultimately our treasure has to be in heaven. But in terms of, as thinking in terms of warfare and money as a defense, maybe there is a way where we can have some type of hybrid, as I've suggested, with like a private cryptocurrency and gold and silver. So you're not dependent on either. You can kind of slip in between the cracks, so to speak. Anyway,
Yes.
I don't know where I'm really going with that thinking, but it's interesting. The Bible has a lot to say about the economy, the end times, and we kind of see it kind of coalescing at the moment. So, does that fill you with dread, or does it fill you with optimism? What's your sort of sentiment?
Well, I guess on one hand, I know that God is going to take care of me personally and my family as well. The problem with any system at this point that we can put together as Christians that might serve the Christian community is that the forces of the world are trying to divide us and keep us apart. And it's hard for a Christian community to congeal together to get anything going. Like, for
Mhm.
instance, even a farmer's market at this point in our country would be really tough to get based on your Christian values or your Christian whatever. Maybe a church could kind of get something going, but it won't spread beyond that. So, and I see this as definitely kind of a well, certainly it's a demonic plot to separate Christians who want to be on the watchmen, if you will, to separate them, to censor them, to can't get them canceled to where they can't do anything. Um, so we have you have pockets of Christians that now that are aware of what's going on and they want to do something, whatever. But getting those people together at this point, they get on social media, for instance, they get whacked to death. Um, you know, it's this, and you look at the search engines right now. Google has certainly still 95% of the search engine traffic in the whole world. People go there to get answers, but they won't find the answers that we want to give them. And it's going to be really hard for Christians to maintain any kind of presence other than personal presence. When you get together with a group of people, you can pray, you can give them hugs, have food together, whatever. But that's about the extent of our experience. It's going to be really tough.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think we're kind of seeing a change in maybe the Christian consciousness where they're sort of forsaking the Protestant tenet of sola scriptura, and it's becoming sola scriptura if it's endorsed by a celebrity. And because I find that if you don't have a large social media following, people don't seem to care what you say, even if it's biblically accurate. And the problem with this is people with large social media followings can be controlled with algorithms, and they're not going to say certain things that which might need to be said. So it leaves Christians, as you said, in a pretty sticky position where we need that personal face-to-face interaction. One project that I've been working on that you might be interested in, it's called Resist Surveillance. And it's a system where I can send people, and I've created little business cards I've printed out, and you can just hand them to people. And if you have a conversation, uh, for instance, here in the UK, a lot of people are concerned that they're now introducing face recognition cameras pretty much everywhere, and you can't go anywhere without your face being scanned. In fact, like there's a group called Big Brother Watch who just exposed how a man was fined £90, which is about $120, for covering his face in the public. He was walking down the street and he covered his face, didn't want his face to be scanned, and they
Wow.
stopped him and they fined him $120 for covering his face.
Where there's a facial recognition van, you've covered your whole face up like that.
This man didn't want to be caught by the police cameras, so he covered his face. Police stopped him. They photographed him anyway.
There's no law. There's no law against covering your face. Yeah, okay, well there you go. You let him go then.
Well, maybe
See your face?
maybe it's because I don't consent to being on there,
Oh, right. Okay, why's that?
because I think it's a bit of a government overreach.
Oh, right, okay. That's fine. Can we take your details down? Is that alright?
Don't cover my face, I cover my face. Don't push me over when I'm walking down the street.
The police said this was disorderly behaviour, so they gave him a fine.
I've got a now £90 fine. There you go, look at that.
You let them know that he's got a right to cover his face and he can walk away.
The thing is, we live in a country which is free. We don't have to carry ID, so we don't live in a state where the police have the right to see your ID willy-nilly. This takes away my freedom because you're IDing me without asking.
So within this milieu, it's provided a very useful opportunity to hand out a printed media, which can't be censored. And then on that printed media is a QR code. They scan it, they get sent to a page where they can submit their email. And then I've created an automation system which introduces them to privacy tech and how to use the internet in a way that's secure, and how to use the internet in a way which cannot be obfuscated through algorithm. Yeah. So there's 7 missions, and the first one is here's a way to transact digitally, which cannot be censored or stopped. The next one is here's how to communicate with people directly, which limits your metadata. Here's the browser you should use. Here's the search engine you should use, which doesn't use Google's algorithms and things. Yeah. So that's a great resource for yourself or anyone who's interested, that they can sort of plug themselves in there and get those little missions and start spreading this awareness and start building these alternative communities. Because I think one thing with the heavy-handed censorship that we've seen recently on social media is that it didn't change people's opinions. It just got people to move, right? Yes. So a lot of people got off Facebook and they just went to Telegram, or they went to WhatsApp or Signal. Yeah. And I think direct message apps have become far more popular as a result. Yeah. But yeah, I completely agree with your sentiment that we should focus on a community, and that's really where it's going to come down to. Patrick, how do you think technocracy is going to be marketed to the people? This is something I've thought about. I don't suspect that these master social engineers are going to say, hey, by the way, guys, we're going to track and surveil you all the time, and we're going to introduce this digital surveillance prison, and you'll own nothing and be happy. Unfortunately, I think they did say that, and they kind of regret it deeply. But how do you suspect technocracy will be sort of introduced to the masses in a way that they will want to embrace it?
In America, it's happening right now, I believe. Trump, the disruptor, has embraced the tech bro community completely, basically given the reins to run the country to this whole technocratic cabal, and their intention is to replace the functions of government with AI. This is no doubt about that at this point. That's their overall intention is to bring AI into governance altogether. So you have the Doge committee headed up by Elon Musk, for instance, that's smoking out all this corruption in a government, and these massive numbers of people are going to be fired. Other people will retire. Some agencies will be terminated altogether. That's the effect of deregulation. But in the meantime, to replace all those functions, they still have to be covered somehow. AI is going to sweep in and offer a solution to people. You need to do this now, or else you'll be right back where you were in 2 or 3 years, where everybody's ripping you off. So you have to ask this question too. Klaus Schwab talked a lot about the Great Reset, and if you couple that with Zbigniew Brzezinski's first book, by the way, that was written at the same time Klaus Schwab was at Harvard University, hobnobbing with Henry Kissinger to get the World Economic Forum started in the first place. Brzezinski wrote about a technotronic era. He was looking through the valley to see what's happening today, I believe, with this whole business of technology taking over. And when he wrote that book, starting in 1968, that was the same time that Klaus Schwab was at Harvard University, who is a student at that point of Brzezinski's, or Henry Kissinger. And Kissinger, of course, is one of the founding members of the Trilateral Commission a few years after that. But nevertheless, that Brzezinski was looking through the valley to what we have today, and he saw the old order falling away. And at this point, if the technotronic era represents technocracy today, and I personally believe that it does, what's going on with the old order at this point? Could this be the Great Reset that Klaus Schwab talks about? He's never described what is it going to look like. Is it just economic collapse of everything? That doesn't make good sense for the companies that are giving them money to keep the whole thing going, right? So I don't think it's necessarily economic collapse at this point that will be the event of the Great Reset. Okay. However, we see today that Trump is taking all this effort to deconstruct the deep state, the quote unquote deep state, right? And if this is what the Great Reset looks like, in other words, the destruction of the deep state, then simultaneously we should see the appearance of a technocratic state. If the technocratic state is the end goal, then that's the Great Reset. The surprise for a lot of people in America, the war against in other words, the war against the deep state, that's not what we should be focusing on. We should see what's going to come after the deep state. It's going to be a technocratic state, and it's coming on us very rapidly at this point. And what's going to happen in America here, I can pretty well predict where we're going to go. But basically, at this point, Trump is influencing the whole world at this point to deconstruct the deep state. I mean, Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Gaza. Now, he's talking about taking over Gaza. Interestingly, we have northern Arctic sea routes around Greenland. We have Panama Canal, of course. That's a very important sea route. And in Israel, they've been talking for decades about a Ben Gurion Canal to be built from the Red Sea into Israel, connecting with the Mediterranean, which is, if you ever see it on paper, it would be an amazing thing, because it would kind of be competing with the Suez Canal in Egypt. And so, what's Trump's goal here? Is he thinking about all of these waterways, the ways the ships are going to take goods around the world? Well, he's also talking now, just recently, about taking over half of the income in Ukraine for all their natural resource extraction. That just came out today. That's crazy. I'm just scratching my head saying, something's going on here. Something really big is going on here. These preposterous schemes, if you will, they speak of a major upset in the world order of things. So this could be, in that sense, the Great Reset, giving away to the great technocratic state, and it's not going to be a pretty one for anybody, anywhere.
It's interesting that he seems to have plans to unite Canada, Greenland, and Mexico, because wasn't that originally the plan of historic technocracy, was to have this sort of super American state?
It exactly so, and that was on the cover of their book called The Technocracy Study Course. It was flat out. It's been there for all these years, from 1934 onward, and it's stunning. People, when people wanted to, like journalists wanted to depict a map that what Trump was talking about with Greenland, Canada, and so on, in the United States, inadvertently, some journalists pulled that picture off the book of Technocracy Study Course and just gave that as an example. I chuckled because they don't have a clue what they're talking about, but that's where it started in the first place. They never had a plan to conquer those nations, by the way. They never said a one word on how they would accomplish getting all these nations together in one contiguous block of real estate. They just left that blank. Well, maybe it's not so blank now.
So, Patrick, you have developed a course, a deep dive into technocracy. Do you want to just, as we wrap up here, do you want to kind of dive into that? What exactly does it cover, and how can people jump in on that?
Well, hopefully I'm going to have it done by the end of this month. That would be February. And God willing, it's been a kind of a meaty project for me, because I wanted to communicate. First, I started out with the concept of creating a master class on technocracy that would be maybe like 2 or 3 months long. Then I figured, no, that's not going to work because it just takes too much time to get it together. So instead, I framed a boot camp, if you will. I'm calling the Technocracy Boot Camp. And it's going to consist of 5 days of rather intense learning, video on each segment. There will be approximately 3 segments per day, and I'm going to start from the beginning to right 2025. And I'm going to, by the time somebody's done, they'll be conversant in the language and the techniques of technocracy, where it came from. They'll be able to explain it to people, most importantly. And so anyway, this is going to be on my store, on the shop page on technocracy.news, probably by the end of this month. I'm not sure how much I'm going to charge for it. I'm telling all my premium subscribers right now that subscribe for $7.50 a month to my current website, they will be grandfathered into the course no matter what. So if anybody gets a premium subscription right now, they're going to get the course. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be selling the course separately, maybe for $25, $50, who knows what. But that's my intent.
Great. I think that's a much needed resource. And in fact, something that pastors should certainly look into and to get. I think it's going to be very vital for that. Patrick, thank you so much for your time. I know we could probably talk about technocracy all day. We probably have to cut it off at some point. It's really been a pleasure. I'll put up your ways where people can contact you and get in touch with what you're doing on screen. And yeah, once again, thank you so much for joining me. I think this is a very important topic, and we need to have more discussions about the economy and technocracy.
My pleasure.